All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam. I am located in the United States, and I founded The Blockhead, which is an educational resource that helps people learn about crypto and blockchain in very easy, entertaining language. So today's workshop, we're going to talk about cryptocurrency and digital assets. This will just be an introduction. We can talk about this for hours and hours and get very in depth, but it's going to be a high-level presentation on these topics. All right. So today we're first going to cover a little brief recap on money itself before we dive in deeper to crypto and blockchain. Second, we're going to go over the what, why, and how of blockchain technology. We'll watch a short video to kind of break up the content so you're not just listening to me talk the whole time. I think he does a really great job with the aid of visuals to explain this complex type of information. My goal is to have you leave this workshop with a solid understanding of how blockchain works and hopefully be able to talk about it with others that are somewhat familiar in the space. Third, we'll move on to the crypto ecosystem. So how has everything erupted since 2008 with the introduction of Bitcoin? Where are we at today? And what does the future look like? And then fourth, we'll cover getting into crypto. So this will be kind of your getting started guide to actually how do you purchase cryptocurrency? How do you go about it in a safe way? What's the best mindset to enter this space with? And even if you're not interested in purchasing crypto by chance, it is helpful to know if you're going to be developing a token or a cryptocurrency. So just a friendly reminder, none of this is financial advice of today's workshop. We're just really doing a deep dive into crypto and digital assets. So I love playing this first clip because I think cryptocurrency and digital assets, the space is really complex, and sometimes it can feel really just maddening and mind-boggling. Sometimes you feel like you can't feel your feet because it's just so much at once. So take a quick look at this. This is from 1994, so less than 30 years ago. And this is them.
Back now 56 past. I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
Kay said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around.
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard be around or about in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean,
well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? It's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate with. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does
it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not in it. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide. Right. It's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger.
It came in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie,
but you don't need that. You don't need a phone line to operate internet. No.
All right. So this kind of funny clip just shows you how confusing the internet was to even describe in its early days. And that's kind of where we are with crypto too. So don't feel bad if you feel like you can't explain this to friends and family yet. Really the goal today is just to have it click in your own head. So to take a step back, let's talk about money. So although it doesn't seem like money evolves over time because we use it on a day-to-day basis, and it probably hasn't changed much in our own lives, it has changed drastically over time. When we look at even just the second half of this chart, paper money has been around for the last couple hundred years. Plastic cards didn't come in until the mid-1900s. Electronic money just in the last, 30 to 40 years, technically, but more commonly used in the last 20. And then cryptocurrency technically came on the scene about 13 years ago. So we're still very early. We don't really know exactly how the cryptocurrency space is going to grow. It just depends every day on what is introduced, how we grow as a society, there can be ups and downs. So definitely something to keep in mind. But it is no doubt definitely the future because it fits with how we as a species are evolving. So what is cryptocurrency? It is a digital currency that exists only electronically, meaning it can be sent back and forth digitally. There's no actual tangible Bitcoin token, even though we might see like the Bitcoin coin on the internet. There is no actual coin, it's all digital. Another element here is that it's decentralized, meaning that there's no central authority in control of cryptocurrency. Now, some cryptocurrency probably have teams that develop them, but there's no one actually controlling with a bunch of, buttons and levers how that cryptocurrency operates or the price of it. It's distributed. And the third is that it uses cryptography in a public digital ledger. Now, there's a couple key things in here. Cryptography is basically a way to ensure privacy. It's you can think of it as a one-way lock, so that you can lock information, but you cannot break that lock. You cannot unlock it. So what this does is that within a public digital ledger, so a ledger is basically a giant spreadsheet keeping track of where money is going. Cryptography allows cryptocurrency to be transparent, so we can see this amount was sent at this time to this other address, but the actual addresses and the sensitive information are locked under cryptography, which means that there's privacy, even though there's also transparency. And sometimes this is difficult to wrap your mind around, but hopefully that explanation kind of parses out the two. Now, this is a video, the longest video we're going to watch today. It's about 10 minutes, and it is the what, why, and how of blockchain. And we're going to build upon this. But this, for my research, I think this is the best video that does explain kind of the background, how it works with a couple of interesting visuals and graphics to help illustrate that. And then another why to just solidify that.
The technology likely to have the greatest impact on the next few decades has arrived. And it's not social media, it's not big data, it's not robotics, it's not even AI. And you'll be surprised to learn that it's the underlying technology of digital currencies like Bitcoin. It's called the blockchain. Blockchain. Now, it's not the most sonorous word in the world, but I believe that this is now the next generation of the internet, and that it holds vast promise for every business, every society, and for all of you individually. You know, for the past few decades, we've had the internet of information. And when I send you an email or a PowerPoint file or something, I'm actually not sending you the original, I'm sending you a copy. And that's great. This is democratized information. But when it comes to assets, things like money, financial assets like stocks and bonds, loyalty points, intellectual property, music, art, a vote, carbon credit, and other assets, sending you a copy is a really bad idea. If I send you $100, it's really important that I don't still have money and that I can't send it to you. So this has been called the double spend problem by cryptographers for a long time. So today we rely entirely on big intermediaries, middlemen like banks, government, big social media companies, credit card companies, and so on, to establish trust in our economy. And these intermediaries perform all the business and transaction logic of every kind of commerce, from authentication, identification of people, through to clearing, settling, and record keeping. And overall, they do a pretty good job, but there are growing problems. To begin, they're centralized. That means that they can be hacked, and increasingly are. And JP Morgan, US federal government, LinkedIn, Home Depot, and others found that out the hard way. They exclude billions of people from the global economy. For example, people who don't have enough money to have a bank account. They slow things down, can take a second for an email to go around the world, but it can take days or weeks for money to move through the banking system across the city. And they take a big piece of the action, 10 to 20% just to send money to another country. They capture our data, and that means that we can't monetize it or use it to better manage our lives. And our privacy is being undermined. And the biggest problem is that overall, they've appropriated the largesse of the digital age asymmetrically. And we have wealth creation, but we have growing social inequality. So what if there were not only an internet of information, what if there were an internet of value? Some kind of vast, global, distributed ledger running on millions of computers and available to everybody, and where every kind of asset from money to music could be stored, moved, transacted, exchanged, and managed, all without powerful intermediaries. What if there were a native medium for value? Well, in 2008, the financial industry crashed, and perhaps propitiously, an unknown or anonymous person or persons named Satoshi Nakamoto created a paper where he developed a protocol for a digital cash that used an underlying cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. And this cryptocurrency enabled people to establish trust and do transactions without a third party. And the seemingly simple act set off a spark that's ignited the world, that has everyone excited or terrified or otherwise interested in many places. Now, don't be confused about Bitcoin, okay? Bitcoin is an asset. It goes up and down, and that should be of interest to you if you're a speculator. More broadly, it's a cryptocurrency. It's not a fiat currency controlled by a nation state, and that's of greater interest. But the real pony here is the underlying technology. It's called blockchain. So for the first time now in human history, people everywhere can trust each other and transact peer-to-peer. And trust is established not by some big institution, but by collaboration, by cryptography, and by some clever code. And because trust is native to the technology, I call this the trust protocol. Now you're probably wondering, well, how does this thing work? Fair enough. Assets, digital assets like money to music and everything in between are not stored in a central place, but they're distributed across a global ledger using the highest level of cryptography. And when a transaction is conducted, it's posted globally across millions and millions of computers. And out there around the world is a group of people called miners. These are not young people, they're Bitcoin miners. And they have massive computing power at their fingertips, 10 to 100 times bigger than all of Google worldwide. And these miners do a lot of work. And every 10 minutes, kind of like the heartbeat of a network, a block gets created that has all the transactions from the previous 10 minutes. And then the miners get to work trying to solve some tough problems, and they compete. And the first miner to find out the truth and to validate the block is rewarded in digital currency, in the case of the Bitcoin blockchain with Bitcoin. And then, this is the key part, that block is linked to the previous block and the previous block to create a chain of blocks, and everyone is timestamped, kind of like with a digital wax seal. So if I wanted to go and hack a block and say, pay you and you with the same money, I'd have to hack that block, plus all the preceding blocks, the entire history of commerce on that blockchain, not just on one computer, but across millions of computers simultaneously, all using the highest levels of encryption in the light of the most powerful computing resource in the world that's watching me. Tough to do. And this is infinitely more secure than the computer systems that we have today. Blockchain, that's how it works. So the Bitcoin blockchain is just one. There are many. The Ethereum blockchain was developed by a Canadian named Vitalik Buterin. He's 19 years old. And this blockchain has some extraordinary capabilities. One of them is that you can build smart contracts. It's kind of what it sounds like. It's a contract that self-executes. And the contract handles the enforcement and the management, performance, and payment. The contract kind of has a bank account too, in a sense, of agreements between people. And today, on the Ethereum blockchain, there are projects underway to do everything from create a new replacement for the stock market to create a new model of democracy where politicians are accountable to citizens. So to understand what a radical change this is going to bring, let's look at one industry, financial services. Recognize this? Rube Goldberg machine. It's a ridiculously complicated machine that does something really simple like crack an egg or shut a door. Well, kind of reminds me of the financial services industry, honestly. I mean, you tap your card in the corner store and the bit stream goes through a dozen companies, and each with their own computer systems, some of them being 1970s mainframes, older than many of the people in this room. And 3 days later, a settlement occurs. Well, with the blockchain financial industry, there would be no settlement because the payment and the settlement is the same activity. It's just a change in the ledger. So Wall Street and all around the world, the financial industry is in a big upheaval about this, wondering, can we be replaced or how do we embrace this technology for success? Now, why should you care? Well, let me describe some applications. Prosperity. The first era of the internet of information, brought us wealth, but not shared prosperity because social inequality is growing. And this is at the heart of all of the anger and extremism and protectionism and xenophobia and worse that we're seeing growing in the world today. Brexit being the most recent case. So could we develop some new approaches to this problem of inequality? Because the only approach today is to redistribute wealth, tax people and spread it around more. Could we pre-distribute wealth? Could we change the way that wealth gets created in the first place by democratizing wealth creation, engaging more people in the economy, and in ensuring that they got fair compensation?
All right, so I like that video because he does a good job of explaining kind of the background and the initial issues. I know we covered these in our Foundations to Finance workshop, as well as our centralization versus decentralization workshops that I highly recommend watching before we go further, but important to recap before we dive deeper. All right, so. To work. So I wanted to cover a couple of benefits and attributes of what support those benefits within cryptocurrency and blockchain. So one that we touched on before was transparency and traceability. This is because it is an immutable blockchain-based ledger. So as you saw that spiral of blocks, and as you heard him say, you know, the double spend problem, this makes it very easy to go back in time and see and keep track of all the amounts, as well as the timestamps of all transactions. While we move into the second benefit here, which is anonymity and payment independence, meaning you do not have to go through any third-party service in order to send or receive payment. Now, this is a completely novel idea that started in 2008 with the introduction of Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto. Bitcoin was positioned as a peer-to-peer network. And although we have a lot of things on top of that, like exchanges and custodian wallets that we interact with today, at the very heart of it, everyone does have the ability to just send and receive Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency directly between parties. And unless you're handing cash from, you know, your wallet to a friend, there's really no way to do this electronically, or there was no way to do it before the invention of Bitcoin. Third here is borderless as well as permissionless. So first I'll chat about permissionless. This kind of goes hand in hand with that no middleman payment independence piece. And borderless, meaning this is truly decentralized, it's completely global. Another is secure and counterfeit proof. This is absolutely necessary for any crypto or for any currency to work, is to prevent counterfeit. So people can obviously counterfeit certain fiat currencies today. That's why they have, such intricate designs on, paper money or on coins. A lot of times on larger bills that represent a larger amount of currency, there's something hidden there that you can find with a black light, something that proves its authenticity. Electronically, however, this distributed ledger ensures that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency is counterfeit proof. Another one is that it is programmable and scalable. So this is absolutely necessary because we evolve digitally now. We can see how new technologies enter the space and how we continue to push innovation further and further every single day. And so it's necessary for cryptocurrency to be able to, be upgraded. We can actually make updates to the protocol to make sure that it scales with us as we grow. Things that allow this to happen are things like consensus algorithms, as well as its decentralized nature in general. And the final point here that I really want to drive home is that it is faster and less expensive than fiat currency. So because we can send this electronically, we don't have to go through all those middlemen that you just heard about in the video. Nowadays when you swipe a credit card, you do go through a payment processor and a settlement process, but that's not the case with crypto. And that also makes it much less expensive because it doesn't have to jump through all those hoops. Now, diving into blockchain a little bit more, I know that he touched on it, but there are a couple examples that I think are a little bit difficult to grasp. And so it's helpful to hear it in another explanation, specifically when we talk about mining and when we talk about consensus algorithms. So this is a much quicker video. It's less than 5 minutes. And then the rest of the presentation will be going through how a blockchain transaction works, cryptocurrency, different assets, the larger ecosystem, and how to get started.
Blockchains are incredibly popular nowadays. But what is a blockchain? How do they work? What problems do they solve? And how can they be used? Like the name indicates, a blockchain is a chain of blocks that contains information. This technique was originally described in 1991 by a group of researchers and was originally intended to timestamp digital documents so that it's not possible to backdate them or to tamper with them, almost like a notary. However, it went by mostly unused until it was adapted by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009 to create the digital cryptocurrency Bitcoin. Now, a blockchain is a distributed ledger that is completely open to anyone. They have an interesting property. Once some data has been recorded inside a blockchain, it becomes very difficult to change it. So how does that work? Well, let's take a closer look at a block. Each block contains some data, the hash of the block, and the hash of the previous block. The data that is stored inside a block depends on the type of blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain, for example, stores the details about a transaction in here, such as the sender, receiver, and the amount of coins. A block also has a hash. You can compare a hash to a fingerprint. It identifies a block and all of its contents, and it's always unique, just as a fingerprint. Once a block is created, its hash is being calculated. Changing something inside the block will cause the hash to change. So in other words, hashes are very useful when you want to detect changes to blocks. If the fingerprint of a block changes, it no longer is the same block. The third element inside each block is the hash of the previous block. And this effectively creates a chain of blocks, and it's this technique that makes a blockchain so secure. Let's take an example. Here we have a chain of 3 blocks. As you can see, each block has a hash and the hash of the previous block. So block number 3 points to block number 2, and number 2 points to number 1. Now the first block is a bit special. It cannot point to previous blocks because, well, it's the first one. We call this block the Genesis block. Now, let's say that you tamper with the second block. This causes the hash of the block to change as well. In turn, that will make block 3 and all following blocks invalid because they no longer store a valid hash of the previous block. So changing a single block will make all following blocks invalid. But using hashes is not enough to prevent tampering. Computers these days are very fast and can calculate hundreds of thousands of hashes per second. You could effectively tamper with a block and recalculate all the hashes of other blocks to make your blockchain valid again. So to mitigate this, blockchains have something that is called proof of work. It's a mechanism that slows down the creation of new blocks. In Bitcoin's case, it takes about 10 minutes to calculate the required proof of work and add a new block to the chain. This mechanism makes it very hard to tamper with the blocks, because if you tamper with one block, you'll need to recalculate the proof of work for all the following blocks. So the security of a blockchain comes from its creative use of hashing and the proof of work mechanism. But there is one more way that blockchains secure themselves, and that is by being distributed. Instead of using a central entity to manage the chain, blockchains use a peer-to-peer network and everyone is allowed to join. When someone joins this network, he gets a full copy of the blockchain. The node can use this to verify that everything is still in order. Now, let's see what happens when someone creates a new block. That block is sent to everyone on the network. Each node then verifies the block to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with. And if everything checks out, each node adds this block to their own blockchain. All the nodes in this network create consensus. They agree about what blocks are valid and which aren't. Blocks that are tampered with will be rejected by other nodes in the network. So to successfully tamper with a blockchain, you'll need to tamper with all the blocks on the chain, redo the proof of work for each block, and take control of more than 50% of the peer-to-peer network. Only then will your tampered block become accepted by everyone else. So this is almost impossible to do. Blockchains are also constantly evolving. One of the most recent developments is the creation of smart contracts. These contracts are simple programs that are stored on the blockchain and can be used to automatically exchange coins based on certain conditions. More on smart contracts in a later video. The creation of blockchain technology piqued a lot of people's interest. Soon others realized that this technology could be used for other things, like storing medical records, creating a digital notary, or even collecting taxes. So now you know what a blockchain is, how it works on a basic level, and what problems it solves. Want to learn how you can implement a simple blockchain in JavaScript?
All right. So that was our last video for this workshop, but I think it does a great job of covering a couple of things. First is that consensus algorithm that we touched on before, but wasn't really explained in detail. So this allows each block to be added to the one before it. Obviously, it depends on the different protocols, and this one we learned about proof of work. This is like the Bitcoin protocol, but we also have new different types of consensus mechanisms emerging. So again, to clarify, proof of work is a type of consensus algorithm or consensus mechanism, meaning that it allows all the miners or the validators in the protocol to agree, yes, this is the next block, it will be baked into the previous one, let's move on. Another reminder and a way to think about this in an easier fashion is that the word consensus just means agreement. It means a group agreement. You know, everyone in the network agrees, they bake in the block, they move on. So alternative to proof of work, we also have proof of stake. This is developed because it's a little bit faster than the proof of work consensus mechanism. This is something that Ethereum is being upgraded to. We're also looking, there are more and more types of consensus algorithms being tested and developed so that we can kind of have all the benefits. So proof of work is known to be the most secure, while proof of stake is a little bit faster to use. All right. So
blockchains are incredibly
all right, so let's go into actually how a transaction happens. So let's say A wants to send money to B, and for the purpose of this exercise, we'll say A is Alice and B is Bob. Now the transaction is represented online in a block. The block is broadcast to everyone in the party. So within the network, those would be called nodes. And these nodes basically reach the signals and keep a copy of the ledger and allows the network to be decentralized. So it's not just relying on the miners who are actually creating the blocks. Those in the network, they approve that the transaction is valid. The blockchain then is added to the chain, if you remember that giant spiral from the first video, or perhaps the links in the second one. So this makes sure that no one can go back in time and edit what's in a block because everything is chained together. And then finally, after this process kind of happens under the hood of the car, so to speak, then the money actually moves from Alice to Bob. So Alice and Bob, to clarify, they don't actually see the block, the broadcast, they don't see everything that's happening underneath, just as you might not see what happens if you swipe a credit card or if you send money from one person to another person electronically right now. You don't actually see the money change hands. You don't see what's going on in the engine. You just see the outcome. So again, this is just an example of how a transaction happens on the blockchain. Now let's talk a little bit about the crypto ecosystem. So this is when it starts to get a little bit more fun, a little bit more relevant to today because it's just completely blown up in the last couple of years. So I want to do a quick dive into cryptocurrency history. So this timeline is accessible on the blockhead. It's the blockhead.com, and you can find it by going to this left nav here. It's under Learn, and then if this will load, it's under Crypto History after Learn. So you can find it right here if you ever want to reference it again. But essentially, this is kind of how cryptocurrency came to be. We started in 2008 when Satoshi Nakamoto published the Bitcoin white paper. Now, a white paper is simply just a presentation, a paper, if you will, that outlines a problem and a solution, and perhaps a technology that is the solution at work. You can access the white paper here if you'd like. It's the original one. It hasn't been amended since. It's free to view, and it's actually very interesting to read through. It's not that long, and it's not as complex as you would imagine. Second, in early 2009, the first Bitcoin transaction took place. So Nakamoto released this paper, but nothing really happened, even though it was a novel idea. And whoever this Nakamoto person or group is sent Hal Finney 10 Bitcoin. This is a person that was in the cryptography, electronic peer-to-peer network kind of space, already doing research. About a year later, there had been some activity going on and growing, and the first purchase of Bitcoin happened where 2 pizzas were purchased from Papa John's for 10,000 Bitcoin. Now you can imagine today how much money those 2 pizzas are actually worth. But this is very early in the day when Bitcoin was worth less than 1 cent. Fast forward to 2013, we have the first Bitcoin ATM that launches in Vancouver. Clearly at this point, it's starting to pick up speed. These are the early adopters. And in 2013, Bitcoin reached $1,000. So you can see within its first 5 years, it went from less than 1 cent to $1,000. And that's an incredible appreciation. I'm not going to go through all of these, so I'll just highlight a few. But 2015, Ethereum then launched, and this was the second cryptocurrency to come on the scene. Today, we kind of still see it as the second most popular. So Ethereum launched smart contracts. What smart contracts do is, as we touched on previous videos, it allows a cryptocurrency transaction to happen based on certain criteria. So this really laid the platform for all of decentralized finance that we know today. As we go on in 2017, Bitcoin surpassed the value of gold, at least for 1 ounce of gold. 2017, it became a legal method of payment in Japan. Over the years, we saw more and more things happen. Dogecoin comes up, Square starts to buy Bitcoin, PayPal enables users to buy. So we see these larger, companies, especially tech companies like Tesla, actually start to get involved in the scene. I think this makes sense because these CEOs are pretty tech savvy. They're very sophisticated. They're able to see trends before they happen. So with PayPal, Tesla, Square, people like Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey being able to jump in preemptively and kind of start this larger trend with institutional investors. This was a huge, huge change for Bitcoin in a positive way. That's why we've seen the price more than double within the last 6 months. Last October, it was still in the 4 digits, and since it's been in the 5 digits. Lots of people can speculate and do analysis and project Bitcoin, but you can see throughout this history here that it's definitely picked up speed. And then over time, the space is continually innovated with the introduction of things like Ethereum, decentralized finance, and even meme coins that are purely sentiment based, like Dogecoin. Now, I think it's helpful to understand the history because then we can look at today. Now, this crypto map is actually 4 years old, but already you can see how much it exploded in 2017. I want to highlight 3 different colors here. So the first, the gray, are what we think of as currencies. These cryptocurrencies are used as a store of value, like Bitcoin, or perhaps as a medium for transactions, like Ripple or other things. There are privacy-oriented coins. These are things like Dash, Monero, and these provide more privacy than something like Bitcoin. Just a little bit more restrictive. Then there are altcoins. So these can be a lot of different things. It's a very big bucket, although it's a small corner of this specific map. As I said before, things that can be traded based on sentiment, like Dogecoin, are just pure sentiment. They don't have a utility. They're not really used for anything. They're just traded back and forth. Yes, we'll leave that there. Then we'll move on to platforms. So these actually provide an infrastructure for other projects to be built on top of. The main one here that I want to talk about is Ethereum. So with those smart contracts, it basically enabled other apps to be built on top. This has given way to thousands of things like ERC tokens, as well as other decentralized finance platforms that maybe provide other benefits besides Ethereum. And then another one here are very specific verticals. So these can be things like central backed currencies, things for data verification, storage networks. Really, the sky is the limit. There are so many different types of cryptocurrency here that has like specific utility. And again, this is already outdated by 4 years. There have been so many more that have come up. I would highly recommend looking into things like Polkadot or Algo. There's just a lot that's come on the scene. Now, one of my favorite topics here is how to buy cryptocurrency. Again, this is not financial advice. However, I think this is all really helpful information to understand. Because even if you're not buying cryptocurrency or you're developing one, you're going to understand the user journey behind that. So some common myths I want to tackle here. I have heard these from a lot of friends and family over the years, as well as just in the space on different podcasts and things that I just want to take some time to bust. I think it helps. I think a large barrier to cryptocurrency and digital assets is the unlearning that we have to do of how money works up to 2008. So the first common myth is that money has to be made by a government, and this is just not true. We saw in that initial slide of the evolution of money that governments really didn't come into managing currencies until a couple of thousand of years. I believe it was China and then Rome that introduced currencies for the first time. Another one is, which I think is quite funny now, is crypto sounds illegal. When I first got into the space, I had a lot of friends that mistakenly passed that on to me. And I just want to bust that myth because although crypto can sound cryptic, it actually stands for cryptography, which is basically the highest form of security that we could implement on a digital currency today. So false. Only criminals use crypto. This one I'm always happy to talk about. I know a lot about crime and cryptocurrency. I actually wrote a guide on how to kind of trace back to crimes and use different leads to figure out clues in order to identifying suspects. But basically, the cryptocurrency scene got some bad press in the early days with things like the Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht, who set up darknet markets to buy and sell illicit items online. My dog is also clearly passionate and interested in this subject. But that is just not the case. Actually, cryptocurrency is used for illicit transactions less than 1% of the time. Some cryptocurrencies, like the privacy ones, are more privy to criminal use because of those types of things. But investigators and governments, it's a constant cat and mouse game when it comes to crime, and crime is going to take place no matter what currency you have. In fact, governments and investigators prefer that it happen on cryptocurrency because it's traceable and transparent to an extent. So at least there's a trail that they can follow, where something like cash, there's no digital trail. Another one here is that digital money can be created out of thin air. We know with the ledger that this is just not true. This is not monopoly money. Someone can't copy and paste something in a Google Doc and say that that's money. The blockchain makes sure that this is counterproof and that there's an actual ledger and everything is in track. Another one is I'm not rich enough for this. And again, this is just not true. You can buy a fraction of a cryptocurrency. You also don't even have to buy crypto. You can just develop and get involved in the space with just time and energy. Finally, I'm not smart enough for this. Now, this one I hate to hear because it doesn't matter your educational background, your professional background, or where you're located in the world. Anyone can learn this material. It's accessible, it's open, and it's permissionless. So it just really takes the time and space to do what you're doing right now, and that is try and absorb as much information as possible that's out there. That's kind of how everyone has done it since this space started. I know now there's a lot more resources, but in the early days, we were just learning from each other. We were going to meetups, we were talking about what's coming out, we were noticing the projects that were coming out, and I think that sentiment is still valid today. It's a very open space, and everyone just wants to help each other learn. Now, some golden rules. So I call these golden rules, although it's not financial advice, these are really going to help you enter the space in a safe way in terms of your mindset and managing the emotions that naturally come up with anything financial. So the first is set it and forget it. With Bitcoin, you'll commonly hear a term called HODL, or HODL. This actually came from a joke over Twitter a long time ago when someone in the crypto space meant to say hold. That's really what this means. We touched on this in our Foundations to Finance workshop where we talked about long-term trading. It means that you're essentially holding an asset for the long term because you have the belief that it's going to go up in value over time. So now the industry they call it hodling, but that is the same thing as just holding, just for the long term. We say this with Bitcoin because Bitcoin is deflationary in nature, meaning that it is likely to go up in value over time. This is not the case with all cryptocurrencies, but it is commonly used in terms of like golden rules with Bitcoin specifically. Another that I want to touch on is not all crypto is created equal. So if you are purchasing cryptocurrency, make sure that you do your due diligence on which crypto you're buying and why. Bitcoin, for example, is different than Bitcoin Cash, or Litecoin is different than Ethereum. So they're all different. They have different use cases, as we saw before in that asset map. Another is only invest what you're willing to lose. So again, if you remember that evolution slide in the beginning of this workshop, we're still in the early days of cryptocurrency and we don't really know where it's going. Yes, it could, take off even more. Bitcoin could go to 100,000 or 1 million easy. But there's really no guaranteed way of knowing that. The world is uncertain and anything could happen. There could also be another coin that comes out tomorrow that ends up being our medium of exchange. It's just still early. So keep that in mind. Usually if you invest what you're willing to lose, that means you're not going to be completely devastated if something catastrophic happens. Again, this is worst case thinking scenario, but something that will help protect you. And finally, this is about money that works. Cryptocurrency was created because our fiat system has a lot of problems. There's a lot of barriers, it's really expensive, and it's quite slow. All right, now how do you actually purchase crypto? It starts by creating an account on an exchange. An exchange is where you're going to be buying, holding, or selling cryptocurrency. An exchange is basically a facilitator that matches you, so you don't actually have to go to perhaps a decentralized exchange or interact with people, bidding on different prices for a crypto. So some common exchanges are like Binance or Coinbase, but this totally varies by regions because exchanges are available in different areas. So I would look at which exchanges operate in your region, which seem to be reputable and have been around for a while, who have safe cybersecurity practices. These are definitely things that you want to make sure are in place before you sign up with one. And then if there isn't an exchange in your region, don't fear, you can develop one. Anyone can create their own exchange. It just takes some research, some work, some development. Second, after you have your account on exchange, you're going to deposit fiat money into that. You can exchange that fiat for other fiat or for cryptocurrency. Third, then you'll be buying, trading, or holding crypto. If you hold your crypto on that exchange, make sure you trust it because that technically means they're being a custodian and they are holding the cryptocurrency for you. I put DEX and CEX here because there are decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges. So the ones I mentioned previously, like Binance, Kraken, different things like that, BitMEX, those are centralized exchanges, meaning there is an authority, there is there's an organization or company running those. That usually means it's a good thing right now because they have the cybersecurity practices in place to make sure that if you do hold your crypto on there, it's safe to a certain extent. They usually are regulated, so it means that if you are interacting with them, you're probably going to be safe from, maybe trading directly with someone who is laundering funds. Decentralized exchange is going to be a little bit more complex, but there is no party running that exchange. No one could ever shut that exchange down or shut that platform down out of nowhere, and it's distributed, so it's more global. So just some different options, things to keep in mind. Finally, let's say you do buy crypto on whatever exchange you choose, then you need to make sure you store it safely. So another golden rule I want to bring up here, again, not financial advice, but just something that's practiced commonly, is that if it's not your keys, it's not your crypto. So if you buy, say, cryptocurrency on Binance and you keep it in your account on Binance, technically they have the keys. It may be in your account, but let's say a hacker gets in or you get scammed somehow and there's a phishing scheme and all of a sudden you check and your account's liquidated, that they're not responsible for that. So because it was on their platform, they were the custodians, you don't have the keys. So if you have the keys, there's another layer of protection. You can move it, you can move your funds from the exchange to a hot wallet. This is something that's still connected to the internet. It can be on your phone. It makes it really easy if you're using something as a medium of exchange or trading frequently. Or you could go one step further and move it to a cold storage wallet. This is something that is offline, that's not connected to the internet. Some really popular ones are Ledger or Trezor. They essentially look like a small USB device about this big, and you plug it into your computer when you want to trade or move funds to and from it. It has different things and things to keep it safe. One thing is going to be what's called a seed phrase. Now, if you set up a hot or cold wallet, that means that they're your keys and you're in charge of keeping that money safe. This is both the beauty, but also the risk of crypto, is that you can bank yourself. Your funds in your own wallet are yours and only yours, which is incredible. You can move it directly to and from people. It's completely in your control and authority, which is amazing. But also there's some risk there. That's why people do use banks, is that they trust the bank to keep their money safe, whether it's in an underground vault or behind a ton of cybersecurity measures. So if you are choosing to bank yourself and hold your own funds, you also need to make sure that you're keeping it safe. So a seed phrase is a 12 or 24 word password that comes with whichever wallet you choose. It's highly recommended that you keep this safe. Perhaps you copy it and store those in different places. You want to keep in mind of things like natural disasters, or if your house gets ransacked, or I know it's really dark things to think about, but when you're keeping your funds safe and you're banking yourself, these are things that you have to think through to make sure that you just go to the ends of the earth to protect your own money. Now, it sounds a lot more complicated than it is. We can certainly do like a follow-up like wallet workshop if you want to go deeper, but storing your crypto safely is very important and should be taken seriously. Now, what's the end game? So what is the end game of crypto? What happens here? This is an open question. Again, it's being changed every single day. Personally, I think, we're starting to see Bitcoin have staying power. Of course, it's volatile. Of course, it goes up and down. But I think more and more people will start putting a little bit money here and there, especially if the fiat currency they use is volatile or more volatile than Bitcoin. We're seeing in a lot of countries that people are using things like Bitcoin or other crypto to transact because it's a little bit safer for them to use. I think this will pick up speed over time. Obviously, it's early and, I'm not predicting the future here. I don't have a magic ball. I don't know myself, but I think I'm starting to see more and more people become familiar with these concepts. If you remember from that initial video of the internet, sometimes it's hard to explain the internet to someone, but we all use it. You're using it right now to watch this video. So I think crypto will become more and more ingrained in our lives. And time will tell what happens. Now, finally here, I know we have about 9-10 minutes left. So some group work. You can do this in a group or you can do this on your own, but I highly recommend doing all 3 of these exercises. By doing these 3 things, I know for myself, that's when I felt like I really understood and absorbed everything that is crypto and digital assets. The first is try to explain what digital currency is to the best of your ability and why it matters. I would recommend doing this with a friend or a colleague who is somewhat familiar with the space. That way there's a lower learning curve for them to try and get it. Or try and write it out to yourself as if you would a journal entry. Dear diary, this is what a digital currency is and why it matters. Sometimes that can really help us absorb everything because this is such a complex topic. Second, I would pick one cryptocurrency and read the white paper to understand its use case. When I started doing this is when I really started to ingrain what crypto is, why it matters. When I reached this step, this is when that spark inside me was like, oh, I finally get it. This also just helps you kind of understand the language in the space. It helps you just kind of wrap your mind around it all. So Bitcoin is online. Again, it's in that crypto history timeline page if you feel like going there on the blockhead.com. You can pick another one. You can pick Ethereum. You could pick a newer coin if you want. But basically a white paper is going to tell you the background, the problem or challenge that crypto is trying to solve, how it's solving it, and usually that's when things click. Third, and most importantly, to really let crypto sink in, I highly recommend getting conversation. So sometimes it's hard right now to attend meetups or lectures or find other people in your community that are into this. I created a forum on the blockhead.com. Here's the URL, but I'll also show you what it looks like. Please post a question and or an answer on this forum to try and engage. Now, there are a lot of prompts here, so you can kind of pick and choose what's based on your interest. If you don't know anything about a prompt, feel free to post a follow-up question. You don't have to use an active email in order to sign up for this. This is what it looks like. And so there are all these different types here. and just post what you think. It doesn't have to be right. It's anonymous. You can make up a name and make up an email. But what's great about this is it's going to get the conversation going. It's going to get your juices flowing, and it's going to build your confidence over time as you engage with others. So I highly recommend using this. You can also use Reddit. Reddit, there's a lot of voices, so there's a lot of noise. If you're a beginner still, I would use this forum. It's still going to be simple. There are other beginners on here, and everyone's kind of starting at the same place. So that concludes today's workshop. Again, here's your work, so go ahead and break out, but it was an absolute pleasure. Again, my name is Sam, and thank you for your time.